I have found in my life and what I've found in my research, which fueled what I did in my life, is that the people who have the most courage, who are willing to show up and be the most vulnerable, are the ones who are very clear about who the critics are. The ones who reserve seats for them and say, I hear you, I get it, I know where the messaging's coming from, I'm not buying it anymore. So to get very clear, the last thing, which I think is the hardest, is this. One of these seats needs to be reserved for you. One of these seats needs to be reserved for me. I need, when we look up and we're putting an idea, our piece of art, our design forward, who do you think the biggest critic in the arena normally is? Yourself. And so, definitely me. Like, I have never watched either of those TED Talks because it's not in service of the work for me. And I try to do things that are only in service of my work, because what would it serve for me to watch it? I would sit there and go, oh my God, suck in your stomach. Oh my God, that's not what you were gonna say. You know, we're so self-critical. And one of the things that I think happens, and I think this happens a lot, it happens in different professions, but I think I see it a lot with creatives, is there is an ideal of what you're supposed to be. And what a lot of us end up doing is we orphan the parts of ourselves that don't fit what that ideal is supposed to be. And what it leaves when we orphan all those parts of us is it just leaves the critic. And so reserved in this seat is this. Where we came from, how we started, our families, that's me, the oldest, of course. The lost years, the years where I was so lost and confused and hurt and disillusioned that I thought the only path to freedom was a flock of seagulls haircut. The higher the hair, the closer to God, we say in Texas. The people who love us, the moments that make us who we are. And in that chair should be this person. The person who believes in what we're doing and why we're doing it, and the person who says, yeah, it's so scary to show up. It feels dangerous to be seen. It's terrifying. But it is not as scary, dangerous, or terrifying as getting to the end of our lives and thinking, what if I would have shown up? What would have been different? Perfectionism, what emerged for me in the data was that perfectionism is not about striving for excellence or healthy striving, which I'm for. It's a cognitive behavioral process, a way of thinking and feeling that says this: if I look perfect, do it perfect, work perfect, and live perfect, I can avoid or minimize shame, blame, and judgment.
You know what I thought when I was reading this? I had another aha.
Two people.
This was my other aha. That perfectionism, I never gotten this before until I read this, that perfectionism is the ultimate fear, that the people who are walking around as perfectionists, who have to have everything so, that they are ultimately afraid that the world is going to see them for who they really are and they won't measure up.
There's no question. That's what it is for me.
That's correct, right?
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's fear.
Because it's very different than trying to be excellent and working hard and doing your best.
Yeah, and so I call perfectionism the 20-ton shield. We carry it around thinking it's going to protect us from being hurt, but it protects us from being seen. We think about vulnerability as a dark emotion. You know, there are a lot of people who talk about positive emotions, negative emotions, dark emotions, light emotions. We think of vulnerability as a dark emotion. We think of it as the core of fear and shame and grief and disappointment, uncertainty, things that we do not want to feel, right? Things that I don't want to be vulnerable because that means I'm afraid. That means I'm uncertain. That means I'm at risk. I'm exposed. I'm in grief. So what we do is we armor up and we say, I do not want to slip into these dark emotions. I will not let myself be vulnerable. But here's what I learned from the research and certainly put into motion in my own life that was the most life-changing, is that vulnerability is the center of difficult emotion. But it's also the birthplace of every positive emotion that we need in our lives. Love, belonging, joy, empathy. How many of you would agree that we're in a serious empathy deficit in our culture today? Totally, right? No vulnerability, no empathy. Where was the access to vulnerability? Where was empathy? You can't access empathy if you're not willing to be vulnerable. You can't fake empathy. Innovation and creativity, born of vulnerability. This is my favorite part. I talked about this I did another TED Talk this year in Long Beach. And I told the story that during 2011 and even this year, after the big TEDx Houston talk went viral, the big calls came from Fortune 500 companies. Oh my God, we loved your TED Talk. It was great. Please come talk to all of our senior leaders. And it's like, okay, what do you want to talk about? Like, we don't care. Just come and talk to us. Just if you could ixnay the shame and vulnerability talk. Every single conversation, barring maybe 10%. It's like, well, what do you mean? Well, we love, you're funny. You have this great research. I think there's a real fit with what we do. We don't really do, that kind of stuff around here. So if you could not mention vulnerability and shame. So just for fun, for grins, I would say, okay, so what would you like me to talk about? Yeah, fourth quarter earnings, like frickin' don't even balance my checkbook. I'm not gonna talk about that. So what do you want me to talk about? Well, the big issue, creativity and innovation. And change, we're going through a lot of change. Okay, so vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity, innovation, change. And the reason that crisis is happening is because you're not talking about vulnerability. I think there's like a thin film of terror wrapped around us. And so if it's not, I'm not safe enough, or I'm not secure enough, I'm not liked enough, I'm not promoted enough, I'm not loved enough. Scarcity,
I don't have enough.
I don't have enough.
I am not enough.
At the very bottom,
yeah,
I'm not enough.
Yeah. Whoa, that's big, 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 big. Somebody ring some bells. We need some bells to ring on this show. But
that's it. And so guess what the number one casualty is of a scarcity culture?
What?
Vulnerability.
We shut down.
We shut down.
Because I'm not going to let you know.
No, because I'm already scared.
I'm not
right.
all together.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is that people are like, oh, well, we lose a little vulnerability. But vulnerability is not just about fear and grief and disappointment. It's the birthplace of everything we're hungry for.
Creativity.
Joy, creativity, faith, love.
Innovation and all of that, yes.
And the whole thing is there is no innovation and creativity without failure. There is no innovation and creativity without failure. There is no innovation and creativity without failure.